Spider Who? Chapter 6. Police Chief Captain Stacy says that there is still an ongoing search for the criminals who were taken from their cells 3 weeks ago, the news reporter informed on her TV. The woman stood in front of a large gaping hole on the side of the prison wall. It was taped off with warnings of caution and construction signs. Captain Stacy urges civilians to remain cautious until they are apprehended. Back to you, Mark. Mary Jane took a drink of her evening coffee, not really paying attention to the news on the television. It was really her dad who was watching it anyway.
Thanks, Deborah,
the news anchor said to the camera, with too white of a smile compared to his rather orange complexion.
In other news, citizens of New York wonder about Spider-Man's sudden disappearance.
Mary Jane, who had just taken another drink of her coffee, sputtered, nearly choking from her sudden coughing fit. Her dad let out a grunt of annoyance at her disruption, as he took a swift swig of his beer, already on his 5th drink of the night. But Mary Jane paid him no mind. Her attention was now wrapped on the screen before her.
It has been 2 weeks since the last known sighting of New York's personal wall crawler, when he had been spotted chasing a van in a high-speed chase through Manhattan.
Entranced, her attention was completely fixated on the screen, drinking in every word. Despite herself, she found herself right on the cusp of daring to hope again. That perhaps the news anchors would finally give her word of what she was so desperately waiting to hear. Every time Mary Jane left the house now, to walk the streets of Brooklyn, or even Manhattan, she found herself looking up, more often than she has ever done before, hoping to catch the sight of red and blue among the towering skyscrapers. So far, she has been left disappointed.
Here to comment more on the issue is Editor-in-Chief of the Daily Bugle, J. Jonah Jameson.
The camera panned to the left, to reveal an upper middle-aged man with an even mix of brown and gray hair, which seemed to look oddly flat on the top. The man's eyes looked small compared to the wideness of his mouth, which was topped with a thick mustache.
Mr. Jameson,
the anchorman, Mark, began.
What do you have to say about Spider-Man's disappearance? Do you think that it's temporary, or is he gone for good?
But Mr. Jameson hardly looked concerned about Spider-Man's lack of whereabouts. No. In fact, he looked smug.
I say good riddance to the menace,
he said with a hard, rasping bark of a voice. Mary Jane's jaw dropped.
That no-good wall crawler has been nothing but a nuisance to the city of New York since he first showed up,
Mr. Jameson continued, getting a little red in the face as he worked himself up in his rant. A vein began to bulge on the man's forehead as his face tightened and scrunched while in the midst of his diatribe.
I have it on good authority that Spider-Man single-handedly crashed a plane onto the beaches of Coney Island. That is blatant disrespect for public property, which he should be fined and jailed for.
If possible, Mary Jane gaped even further at the screen, unable to comprehend how this man was even able to say such horrible things about Spider-Man, who was probably the kindest, most down-to-earth hero that there was out there. The headline at the bottom of the screen changed to Spider-Man Menace?
And don't even get me started on the ATM store that he destroyed while robbing it months back. What has been done about...
The screen turned black. Surprised, Mary Jane looked down at her own hands, not even having realized that she reached for the remote to shut off the television until it was already done.
Hey, what the hell?
Her dad exclaimed, immediately outraged as he turned his irritation on her.
I was watching that.
Well, I couldn't stand to watch another second of it. Mary Jane seethed coolly, still feeling the disgust roiling within her as the hateful J. Jonah Jameson's words still bounced around in her brain. As she stood from the couch, she kept the remote still clasped tightly in her hand, taking it with her as she made her way towards the kitchen.
Then leave the fucking room!
Her dad argued back as he stood harshly from the couch as well. but he stumbled from the abrupt movement as a bit of beer sloshed onto his white shirt. His leg knocked into the coffee table, where her mug toppled over and shattered into sharp ceramic pieces that scattered over the floor. He didn't take notice of the damage as he took thundering steps towards her. Turning to face him, Mary Jane shook her head as she stepped backward, matching his every pace. How can he stand to poison your mind with that garbage? I mean, to poison him more than it already is.
You ungrateful bitch! Give me the fucking remote!
He made a grab for it, but in a split-second decision that was mostly stemmed from her subconscious, Mary Jane threw the remote across the room, out of his reach. They both followed the arc of the remote in the air with their eyes, before it landed in the sink, still full of dishwater, with a splash and a plop. A tense second passed before. The pain didn't come straight away. The shock that she felt more than masked it at first. But it still did come. The sting of the slap her father had inflicted across her face. Mary Jane could only stare at the floor, stunned, as she lifted a shaky hand up to her cheek, the very cheek that was flooding with the warmth of her blood to counteract with the pain. Her eyes finally shifted up to her father, and saw that his eyes were as wide as hers as he stood there, frozen, with the offending hand still half raised in the air, just looking at her. He had never hit her before. The feelings that she felt then came at her in a rush, nearly knocking the wind out of her. Trembling severely, she took a stumbling step back, because at that moment, she had never felt so unsafe and exposed before. And a fleeting thought crossed her mind, where she wished that Spider-Man was there, holding her in his protective arms as he shielded her from the outside world. Peter sighed as he stared out the window at the busy, dark streets of Queens. He seemed to be doing this quite a bit lately, ever since the accident, as he tried to reorient himself with the world again. Slowly but surely, his memories steadily regained until only minor details of his life were the only things left as blurs. Though he still didn't remember why he had been near that exploding building that night. Since then, it's been 3 weeks. 3 weeks of confusion, which was lessening every day. 3 weeks of boredom, which was increasing every day. And 3 weeks since he had last seen the gorgeous Mary Jane. Peter sighed again, closing his eyes as he thought of her, resting his chin on his folded arms on the windowsill as he pictured her warm, beautiful face in his mind's eye. Mary Jane has crossed his thoughts once or twice since he had first woken up in his bedroom the day after initially meeting her. All right. So she has crossed his mind a lot since meeting her. Numerous times a day, in fact. With his regaining memory, Peter has since come to realize how big of a deal it was that Mary Jane had protected his secret identity the way that she did. He has been more than tempted to put on his Spider-Man suit and go out to try to find her again. He kept telling himself that it was just so that he could thank her for all that she had done for him. Peter knew the actual truth. He just wanted to see her again. Spend time with her, laugh with her, get to know her. Admittedly, he didn't know much about her, but what he did know, he liked. A lot. For one, he knew that she was selfless and caring from the way that she protected his identity, as well as took care of him in his time of need. She was also confident from her overall demeanor, ambitious from talking about her dream of being an actress and a model. But there's also a level of depth in her eyes as she told him about how her parents fought a lot. It was clear to him, even with his jumbled mind, that there were a lot of layers to Mary Jane. Layers that have yet to be discovered, but Peter so desperately wanted to. But he couldn't just go and see her. For one, his aunt had banned him from being Spider-Man for the foreseeable future. Second, he didn't even have his suit, because Mr. Stark had it to fix it up when he had the time. which hadn't been easy for him to come by since Mr. Stark was currently in DC with General Ross. And the final reason was that it just wasn't a good idea to get Mary Jane tangled up in the web that was Spider-Man's life. It took a while for Peter to come to this conclusion, and when he did, he knew that it was the responsible thing to do. It would be different if Mary Jane knew him as Peter Parker, but for her to spend time with him as Spider-Man? It was out of the question. Or is it? Peter stood harshly from his seat by the window as he tried to shake away the involuntary thought from his head. He started to pace subconsciously back and forth through his tiny bedroom as he raked a hand through his wavy brown hair. Of course, this is all under the assumption that Mary Jane even wanted to see him again. He ran a hand down his face and groaned. Maybe you should just forget it all, and Peter stopped and froze as the now familiar tingling of his spider sense overcame him. He turned on a dime to face the window he just vacated. Right at the moment the police sirens broke through the normal bustling sounds of the city night. Though on autopilot, Peter went to turn for his spider suit, ready to put it on and spring into action, only to suddenly remember that he didn't have it. Sullen, Peter's shoulders sank, resigning himself to stay in instead of investigating the source of those sirens. That is, until the fearful screams coming from the horde of people off in the distance met his ears. Peter's head snapped up at the alarming noise before his eyes caught onto something red and blue out of the corner of his eye. He focused his attention on the floor of his open closet, where the colorful fabric of his first Spider-Man suit lay in a heap. The one that he had before Mr. Stark gave him the upgrade. The suit that he had beat the Vulture in. Peter walked towards the suit and picked it up before he examined it with a pondering eye, when suddenly the sharp pain in his brain forced a new memory on him, as he remembered the last words his Uncle Ben told him.
Peter, with great power, there must also come great responsibility.
It wasn't a matter of choice that he go out and stop whatever was hurting those people out there. It was a matter of responsibility.
My responsibility,
Peter whispered, before he whipped off his shirt and jeans, once again becoming who he was meant to be. I would really appreciate it if you all left me a comment down below and also liked and subscribed. It really encourages me to continue on with this story. Thank you so much for all of those who have already subscribed. I appreciate every single one of you out there. Also, many of you have already suspected that I'm an avid comic book reader. Not the new stuff from ASM. We don't talk about the new stuff from ASM. We talk about the old stuff from ASM. Because we enjoy those stories. We don't enjoy the new stuff. Come on. Fuck Paul, by the way. Anyway, as a result, you'll be seeing a ton of random Easter eggs dropped throughout this story. I would love it if you could point them out in the comments down below if you managed to catch them. Thank you so much for listening, and also thank you to everybody who volunteered their voices for this audiobook series. And then also a special thank you to my editor who puts together these hodgepodge of voices. I love this community so much. Everybody is always so kind, and as always, thank you so much for listening, and please ring the bell down below so you know when the next chapter releases. Thank you.